So again, this initial character is relatively small. It's hard to see every detail that's there, but when you take a look at the overall look, it does have this kind of a coy approach to it. Starts off with the circle for the head again. Kind of went over the top of it, but there's the circle. And again, the spine being the gesture, so the spine trying to go down the flow of the character up and along this tail section here, trying to build that up. And can't see it too well now, but the spine section as it goes through, and giving at least dots for the shoulders to try to build up the perspective angles going that direction. So the shoulders being higher, and then it gets down to the hips, almost horizontal, a little bit up to the left, and that's giving you this point. So then the stick figure, they kind of hide the hand, which is nice. Don't have to draw the hand, but then the right side of him kind of comes over and across, still makes the circle from the hands that we've done before. And then as you come down into this character with the hip to the kind of a knee and an ankle, not that we all know the anatomy of the mice, but that's just kind of giving us a little help. And then down to these feet. So they don't give you a lot of detail, so you're trying to anticipate what this is and create most of it. So as you go through this section, you're kind of adding to it, trying to take a look at where this line would be. And you can see I have a lot of lines. If I was going to shade this in, I'm going to have you try it in pen and ink. We'll see if this works out. But you have to go and take a look at the final sketch, which is, again, hard to see, so you're trying to add some of this to it. So here's the fingers coming up like that, trying to build that section up. Still looking at the overall thickness of the lines, you'd build it up with some elliptical shapes, just as you're doing with an ellipse template. Try to think of that into the freehand drawing of this, where you're building all these up into circular shapes. When it gets into the facial features, a little trickier, because you do have the same idea with the head, the circles for the eyes, added a little bit with the eyes for the eye line, and a little bit more with the section for the eyes themselves. The nose is a little tricky from a front view. If you had the circle like we've done before, now they have two smaller cheeks that when they intersect, that gives you this triangular shape. And that's at a 3/4 view, so you're trying to slide that in there. And they also have that extension coming out to be the mouth. So wrapping around, trying to get that initial piece. Okay, and then they have a little bit of the lower lip where the finger rests, kind of holding it on that piece. And the rest of it, as far as the ear, has at least a side that you can see of it where it connects. Still based off of a circle, elliptical shape within it, and then all the extra pieces that fit in there, extra pieces of hair that wrap around. Also this side cheek that you can see, aside from the nose in there, goes on to the other side. You can barely see that section because it's a 3/4 view. So it built it up like that. So I'm going to try to have you ink this in. There's a Pilot marker, fine line marker. You might have microns. You might have some pens of your own. I'll give you one of these to work with. This is a Sharpie. Two-tip, has a heavy line on one side and a finer point on the other side. So just to get it started, I'll probably start with the finer point of the Sharpie. This is, you've seen kneaded eraser. I'll give you a section of this to take, and it's not needed because you need an eraser, but it's needed because you're kneading it just like dough to try to keep it soft. And sometimes if I've drawn too much and I decide to ink this in, I can always erase after the ink dries, but sometimes it picks up the ink even though it's dry, and a Sharpie is a pretty permanent marker. But just making a coil out of this eraser and just kind of rolling it over the drawing, it's picking up some of the graphite, not all of it. But if I've gone too heavy with the drawing, it's lightening it up a little bit. And in that case, it makes it a little bit easier to see it and let the ink take more of the dominant effect here. So we'll see how far I can get with this. So now I've covered this partially. And again, the difference between the textures that you have on your page. So I'm going to start with the smaller one first. And generally, if you use a brush, it's just enough to get the outline started before you put anything on there that might be of heavier lines, and to try and anticipate the shading in the drawing. So here's the pupil. Here I'm trying to put a little bit of the iris in as well, and any part like this. So I'm not pushing that hard either. I'm just trying to give it a basic beginning and building this part up. So you can take a look again at the reference here to give yourself a little bit of help. It's a small image, so it's kind of pixelated, so that's what I'm saying. That's where you have to kind of create some of your own. And turn the page, turn the drawing to give yourself the best line that you can. And like I said, when you first start this, if you haven't done this too much, it's a good idea just again to get the line. Take a look at which line you're going to use on this drawing, the graphite itself, and if a line overlaps, try to anticipate where it's headed. But that's this piece. Sometimes it's good to work from the top to the bottom, left to right, if you don't have a piece of scrap paper, I say, to put on the drawing, and see what you can do. So, and try to let it be a free flowing line. It's tricky if you're sketching this out. So there's the eyes, maybe a little eyelash for now. And again, taking a look at this side here, you can always go back and heavy up line. That's why I'm trying to start off with just a thin one first. And when you get in something like this with the fingers, let them wrap around. So again, just kind of the outline. Don't worry trying to shade it. We'll just try to use the pen itself. And again, whether you go left or right, top to bottom, you kind of get used to giving yourself the best image based on the stroke that you come up with. And again, if you think back to Illustrator with the pen tool, trying to illustrate that section, builds that section pretty quickly here. So I'm trying to make this whole stroke as I do that. And again, try and anticipate the overall geometry of this shape. And really and something like the tail, so the stroke is going to be a pretty long one. See if you don't have to do it all at once, but just kind of giving yourself a kind of a steady free flow in there, starting with the point, trying to anticipate the distance around it. And for most part, that's kind of the outline to it. Okay. The next step would be to go back in and, as I'm trying to say, to make the heavier lines on the base of the character, to do the same thing into this section. So as I come down here, taking a look at the nose, maybe doing some of these pieces, becomes a little more advanced as you're trying to put this together. Find the other side of it, maybe a little darker. looking for the thickness of that line initially. Take your time looking back at the eye. If you do any eyelashes, start in the middle and let it brush itself out. I'll give you another pen. This is a Pilot, almost like a razor point, but it's not as... You'll get used to them. You'll see which ones you like the best. I'll let you guys decide as you go through it. But say like this ear, I'll let it be dark on the bottom here, maybe on the inside. You can, if you feel comfortable and have done it before, you know, go crazy with it, with what you've got. And just kind of go over some of the lines if it needs heavier. If you jump right to the other tip, you'll see a definite change to it. Just trying to get you thinking of that shape. So taking a look down here, I haven't really offset any of the values yet, so I'll just kind of go over it. It's almost like the width tool in Illustrator. And you can see if I've made it a jagged edge, go back in and just heighten that up a bit. And I'll try to show some other samples of this. And again, don't push too hard because you don't want to mess up your tip there. I'll come down here what makes more sense with the thick lines at the base. Okay, you can even work on the drawing upside down if it is. Spin it around. No rules for it. And you're trying to still kind of look for the thin and thick line to make this read out pretty good. So that's the first part. Now the section that still has the graphite, so when you take the kneaded eraser, and if you take some of this out, the only bad part is that you lose the graphite. And the graphite is kind of there, and it kind of helps the drawing, so you're trying to make this eraser as soft as you can. And when you take away the pencil line, the drawing looks a little shocking because it's stark. It's the only thing you have is that pen line. And the graphite was still there trying to shade some of it for you. But now it's all on its own. So you gotta go back in there and see it. Now this is where you can do some of the tone. And taking a look again at some of the details. So once you lose that pencil line, you're pretty much on your own here, free solo in it. And that's where you gotta see if you can find those lines again. And again, as you draw this, make it large enough. You can see that this is the size of the pen. That's the size of the character, so don't make it too small. But I'll get you guys set up. So there it is, just kind of a pen and ink illustration out about